Hey, Steve, thanks for hopping on. Can you just start off by giving a quick overview of who you are?
Well, thanks for having me. Again, my name's Steve Kleva. I own and operate Kleva Built with my wife, Sierra. And I guess my background, my dad was from Croatia. My mom's from Slovenia. I'm first generation American. I have 3 sisters. What else? I've always been into tinkering with stuff, being mechanical, and I only realized a little later on in life that was something I was actually fairly good at. And I think it's the launch of the business is where I started to understand, like, okay, this is what I want to do and, what I'm happy doing.
Cool. So with that, where did the interest in creating strength equipment come from?
Well, around the time where I started tinkering with the idea I was into my powerlifting career, as you could call it. I did bodybuilding for a while, got into powerlifting, and I've always had a fabrication background, and it was mostly in the automotive field. But I remember just thinking, man, it'd be so convenient to have a better jack or something smaller. And I've seen the other alternatives that are available, and I just felt like there was so much room for improvement because a lot of the deadlift jack designs were very rudimentary and all the same. So there has to be a more improved way. So at the time I was actually living in Rockland, California with a buddy of mine, Matt Ogus. You might know who he is. He's an influencer on YouTube. And I remember in the garage, I just started, making something. I was like, I'm going to see if this concept works. And then it kind of went from there.
Cool. Well, that's actually what I have next. So on the website, it says the Genesis Jack was launched in 2017. Mm-hmm. I'd be curious to hear when did you start tinkering with the idea, or how long before it was launched? And then what did it take to actually bring it to market?
I think I started the very first prototype was 2014, probably late 2014. And I essentially cut out of steel, the outline of what the current jack looks like, even though it was a lot more rudimentary. It didn't have a handle that was nice or anything like that, or smooth lines. And it was basically an idea for me to see, does this fulcrum concept work? Because I thought if you use a fulcrum, it's a lot more efficient than trying to actually lift the weight. So I cut this shape out and I hooked it onto the bar. Even though the bar wouldn't stand on its own, I realized, wait, this actually kind of works. And it was just a very rough idea. And then from there is when I tried a second option where I made it wider. And, okay, now I have some stability, but now it weighs 8 pounds because I'm using all this extra steel. And just from there, just over and over again. But it wasn't something I really had in mind to market at first. It was more so just me creating something. And it's something I revisited on and off for months. And it got to a point of where I was starting to invest more of my energy into it because I felt invested into it. And I'm like, man, I've put some money into this. I put a lot of time into it. So I got a little bit more excited about the final product. But it's my wife that pushed me to actually do something with it, because if it's just me, honestly, I would just keep revising. Uh-huh. And when I think it's great, I'll look at it and go, okay, there's something that can probably improve. I feel like there can always be an improvement. But my wife is very much so that you're like, hey, shit or get off the pot. So she put up a website because she's a genius like that and put it all together, made it look nice. And we decided, okay, what are we going to do with this? I had 10 made of the final design at that time, and which isn't cheap, when you only make 10 of something. And ship those out to people I knew within the industry that I knew from bodybuilding and powerlifting. And it's like, hey, this is something I'm looking to launch. Do you have any interest in helping me out? Promote it, basically. I can't, I give you the jack. You're the first person to have it. If you can spread the word, that may help. And we did a lot of groundwork in that regard. And once we launched it, it was really successful. And then that's kind of how everything started.
Do you remember what you sold that for?
Well, we did. So I think in order to really get that influx, because we essentially bootstrapped it, we didn't have all this money to dump into inventory. Like I said, if you want to price something accordingly, you got to do volume in order to get that price down. And that costs a lot of money. So we essentially offered a pre-order at a really discounted rate. I think is something like $65. And this was the first generation. And once we launched, we took that money, rolled it back into inventory, and then the price, then went up to its standard price, which I think at the time was $89.99.
Okay.
And then we basically kept rolling whatever profits from the sales back into inventory so we could just start growing the business.
That makes sense. What were you specifically doing in the automotive industry at that time?
Well, before I moved to California, I was doing like specialized in GM platform, LS engines, high performance stuff in Corvettes, Camaros, and all that. And I did that for probably 10, 12 years. When I moved to California, it was me trying to get like a fresh start because I was a little burnt out with the automotive stuff. But once I moved back, and this is still during the development of the first generation jack, I shifted gears and went back to fabrication only. So even though I was actually still in the automotive field doing mostly exhaust and reverse engineering to prototyping for automotive field. That's where I learned a lot of the techniques and processes, and I had a lot of good resources through that, where that kind of merged together with the whole design process of the jack. And it was in the before I left the industry, it was the fabrication, development, and manufacturing in the automotive field. Yeah.
Got it. And then can you take me back to that first prototype when you were first kind of mocking up the product? What did you use to create that first model where you're just kind of testing it out to see if it worked?
Well, the advantage I had was I have equipment. So I have like bandsaw, like the toolbox, all the fabrication, air tools, and all that. So I just cut it out of, I think it was 1/4 inch mild steel. And it was just a one-dimensional, one-plane part. It looked like just a piece of flat strap with a foot on it and a curve. And I actually have pictures. I think there's actually a picture on our Instagram of that. And yeah, it was just, I was in the garage and I hooked onto the bar. And that's when it was kind of like, okay, this is going to work. And that was just a rough draft. So I know that if I invest a little bit more energy into refining it, it'll be something. Yeah.
Cool. So, why did it take 3 years to actually go to market? Was part of it just like you weren't even thinking about selling it? Or I'm just,
I think that was one of the things. Is I wasn't really, the end goal wasn't to turn this into a product that I was going to mass produce. It was just something I was interested in. And it was also the kind of, I think the part that took the longest was I was learning how to create something that I was happy with, but also cost effective, which is a very big challenge because the nicer you make something, usually it comes with a higher price tag. So the times where I stopped giving it attention is when I felt like, okay, this is the design I like, and then I'd price it out. And if it costs me, even if I buy 500 of them, it costs me $75 each. How am I supposed to make a profit off that if I'm selling it for 80 or $90? Because there's the costs to create that many people are aware of. So I think it was where I would not essentially give up, but just take a break and like, okay, like this is going to be too expensive to make. And then over time, I'm like, all right, I'm going to revisit it again and see what is making it expensive. Okay, I'm using this material. Maybe I should try this material, or maybe I should try this method, or I can substitute this part or this type of hardware. And the thing I do is, okay, well, what can I remove from this that costs money? So even it's like minimizing the amount of hardware used. But then you have to be more strategic with where that hardware is so you don't lose structural integrity and the strength of the product. So that's where I think I kept jumping back and forth. So it wasn't like I was working on it for, 4 years straight.
Right.
Or a few years straight. It was just, it was a constant revisiting because I was still navigating what I was actually wanting to do with it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. Cool story. What about product number 2? So we said December 2017 was the launch of the Genesis Jack. How about number 2? What was it and how long after the Genesis Jack?
Well, I think it was actually the 2.0 that came. Which
right.
I guess, I don't know if you'd consider that a new product, but after that would be the landmine. And I think the reason I came out with the landmine, or what drew me to developing that, was during the hype of the COVID and all that, there was a limitation of equipment. And that was one of the pieces that I saw a lot of people talking about that was unavailable because everyone was selling out. And it's a product that you can use over a multitude of different exercises. So a lot of people were trying to get the most bang for buck, so with a landmine, you can do rows and, all kinds of movements. So I thought, okay, I looked at all the landmines available and I thought, wait, these all look pretty close to the same. What can I do differently that's going to be improved that would entice people? Because we're a smaller company. So the thing we have to do things differently in order to gain attention, because I can't just create the same thing, put our logo on it and sell them, because we can't compete with other companies doing that. So the only other option is to innovate. And that's where I created with the adroit landmine and has that bearing concept and the polycarbonate sleeve, because that's something that I thought was lacking that a lot of people wanted.
Cool. And what about just in general today? What can you give an overview of what you do sell today and what your overall business looks like?
So right now we have, I think it's 4 products. We got the Genesis Jack 2.0, the Adroit Landmine, the Genesis Jack Pro, which is full-size jack, and the Atlas, which we just released, which is that landmine cable attachment.
Are you able to share which one is the most popular?
Well, I think it's a 2.0 or the Genesis Jack, because it's been around the longest. So that thing has, what is it, from 2017, 4-5 years in the market. So I'd say that's the most successful. That's the product that supports our business the most. And so I would have to say the Genesis Jack.
Got it. Do you have any, I know you're a man of many ideas, but do you have a number of products you'd like to bring to market, but they just quite aren't there?
Yeah, I'm actually, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that was
okay.
it.
I have a palette actually over here I'm looking at, and it's got a stack of just random things I've worked on. And what I ended up doing is I got, I think, a little ahead of myself, because once that product took off, I was like, okay, I'm going to start coming out with all these other ideas I have. But it came to like this crossroads where it's like, wow, I didn't realize how much money it's going to cost to launch this many products, because just one product, that's that much more inventory you have to support, and that it really compounds. So I went through like maybe a year or so where I created another 5 or so products, and they're probably 90% there, but I stopped because I realized, okay, even if I get it all the way, I'm not in the position right now to launch, this product. So they're kind of sitting on the back burner, but I would love to, I eventually want to transition to the point where I can release more of my ideas within a reasonable amount of time, so they're not just sitting.
Right. And right now it's just you and your wife working, right?
Ever since we started, that's how it's been. And I think I've managed companies before. The shop I was working at that was in manufacturing, I was managing, and that's not the direction we're really wanting to go, is to grow a business in regards to space and employees and all that. So I think we're wanting to keep it simpler. And I think that's where we're eventually wanting to somewhat shift into more of like a licensing approach, because in order to continue to grow, we're either going to have to take on help and employees and that kind of responsibility, or relinquish a little bit of the manufacturing.
Got it. Can you explain to me in a perfect world how that would work then?
Well, that would entail us partnering with a company that we share the same values with in regards to like quality and innovation, and that can support and push the products probably even better than we can, because honestly, it's just us two. So,
right.
We don't really do anything in regards to put money towards marketing or have people, shooting content. It's basically just Sierra doing everything you see on social media is pictures Sierra took, and everything on the website she created. So between the both of us, we've done everything. So I think it's instead of taking on employees, we'd like to lighten that load so we can both focus on what we're really good at. And I think I'm the best at designing, as opposed to standing around assembling all day, which can become a little bit mundane. And I feel like at that point, it's a little wasteful in regards to the capabilities that I have.
That makes total sense. And it's crazy that right now, it feels like you've had more of an impact than just 4 products, if that makes any sense. You wouldn't guess that you're only selling 4 products right now.
Yeah.
Based off of kind of your reputation within the community and just the overall brand recognition that a lot of people have for you. So, yeah, I think that's incredibly impressive, and that would be awesome. And I think that would be a win for the community too, if we can get more of your product ideas out there.
Thank you.
All right. You're sitting in a warehouse, it looks like, with a lot of boxes behind you. Could you just explain where are you what's your space right now for work?
So we have a warehouse here in Tempe that we ended up moving into about a year ago, because up until last year, we were working out of our house, and our house isn't huge.
Yeah.
I was working out of our garage, which is like, I wouldn't even call it a 1-car garage. I think it's 180 square feet. And you'd be surprised how efficient you could become when you lack the resources. So at the time I was working out of the garage doing all the fab assembly, and then we had a shipping container at our house that stored like these boxes and all that. And it got to a point of where that was just for one product. So I'm like, if we want to add another one, we need more space. So we moved into this space, which allowed me to broaden up my fabrication stuff, because I also do subcontracted work for another company in the automotive field. And it just allows us to have more space. I got like these 8-foot U-line tables that we can, instead of doing 10 jacks at a time, I can assemble 50, in assembly line fashion. So it became a little bit more efficient. And now we have a backdrop so Sierra can take better pictures. And we just needed a little bit more room if we were wanting to, add another product or two.
Yeah, surely you were getting a little suffocated at home.
Oh yeah, it was very tight, but I don't regret it. And honestly,
right.
I still feel that the lack of resources is kind of an advantage if you can stick with it, because it forces you to be a little bit more creative with ways to find solutions to problems.
Yeah, and the more leaner you are, the more agile you can be.
Oh yeah. Our overhead was $150 a month for that shipping.
Right, right.
And our mortgage. So.
Cool. Can you, like you mentioned, you have a lot of different product ideas. Can you discuss maybe some of the failures or products that ultimately didn't happen because of, like you said, cost or just overall feasibility or lack of interest from the community? Any of those come to mind?
We haven't had any, I wouldn't say public failures, but for instance, the landmine, the first design or the first final design that I made, I had all the stuff ordered. I think I ordered 500 units worth of material. And only until then I realized that the bracket concept I came up with that required some welding of some tabs, it worked doing small test runs and welding, but if I were to weld 500 of these and try to do it at a pace that would make it productive, it was not going to be feasible because of the time and the amount of, I noticed there's starting to become some warpage issues if I wanted to speed up the time. So I actually still have a pallet full of these brackets, 500 of them sitting here that I don't want to throw away because I could probably use them for something, because I don't like being wasteful, but I just scrapped that whole idea, and then I redesigned the bracket and had another 500 of those made. So that was a costly mistake, and that's why I hammer away at the design as much as possible, because that experience, and I want to minimize, because mistakes get expensive.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
So 500, can you share how much those cost you to get?
I don't know off the top of my head, but I mean, it was thousands of dollars.
Yeah. Gotcha.
It was enough for me to be like, man, that was not pleasant.
Yeah. One thing that your products are well known for is also just being knocked off, sadly. Are you able to give a few examples of just some knockoffs of people, or are you able to give a few examples of times you've been knocked off and what that does to your overall business?
I think product that's been knocked off the most is the jack, the first generation, or the Genesis jack, because it's been around the longest. And there was a couple early on, and I think those were more impactful for us because we were new and we didn't establish our name as much. So I think our fear was that somebody with more resources would run with our design, and essentially we would be left behind. But once we gained more recognition, COVID hit, we probably have another 20 copies of that jack. I'm not going to list anyone off in order to not help promote them, but it hasn't really impacted our business at all. It's just more so, to me, it's almost like just a disappointment in just how people operate, because, it does take effort to copy somebody. So I don't understand why you would just not put more effort into creating something more unique to yourself, and they're essentially piggybacking off of those years of work that I put in and the risks we took. And, once I see that, hey, this is a successful concept, let's just put it together and throw something out there. So I feel for the people that buy those, because the only reason those are selling is because they're cheaper than ours, because ours is a premium product and they're cheaper for a reason. So usually people that copy, they don't really focus on quality. They're just doing it to make money. So that's their main goal. So usually those companies are very short-lived, because that's the one-trick pony. What are they going to do? Keep copying everybody until they're just, have a line of copies.
Yeah. I'd be curious to hear, do you feel that most of your clients are home gym owners, or do you think it's more going to other, like, more, not necessarily commercial, but gyms that are ran as businesses?
I think it's the majority is home gym, people that train at home, and we do get a lot of orders from gyms, but I wouldn't say it's, we're not outfitting EOS or anything like that. Typically, it's more of like the niche crowd that wants like a really high quality product and are training from home. And that's kind of where we're catering it to. That's why a lot of our stuff's lightweight or compact, because I understand that people that have just say a one car garage, space is a factor. So that's a big reason why we don't create huge equipment, because the cost, the space, and the fact that, it's mostly commercial gyms or large facilities that are going to be purchasing that.
Uh-huh. All right. Moving on to what does your day look like, or just a standard day for you, Steve?
Well, I usually get here pretty early in the morning. I check all the orders and I start processing orders, and Sierra is usually handling all the emails and customer support stuff. But the most of the day is me assembling and then intermittently making calls to whether it be, vendors or suppliers or whatever, or girl talk with Dylan, with AdMat, stuff like that. So it's pretty repetitive, and that's where I'm trying to get more into like the licensing, because I like to create instead of just manage, because at this point we assemble so many jacks, it's I feel like my brain's turning to mashed potatoes.
Yeah, surely. So how much time do you spend on actually thinking about new products or tinkering?
Oh, like all the time, but I've almost had to create like a mental block, because I come up with an idea, I'm like, okay, and I start drawing parts, and then I realize, wait, I'm not going to be able to do anything with this yet, so I should probably try to take care of other priorities first. So I'm always drawn to the design. I'm always thinking in my head of designs, and typically I'll lay there, usually in bed at night, and I'll be thinking, okay, this is a cool concept, and I'll actually start the design process in my head a bit to do some trial and error of what will work or what's feasible, and then once I can come up with an actual idea, I start to put it to paper.
Got it. So outside of thinking about products, what else keeps you up at night, or what would you say your biggest worry is as you continue to work within this home gym industry, or just the equipment producing industry, I should say?
I wouldn't say I have any glaring worries. I'd say it's more so like maybe thinking about like suppliers, hoping that they're going to continue to provide at the level of quality they are, because there's times over the years we've had to drop certain people because quality has suffered or their communications has suffered. So it's not easy to find people that do their job and do it really well. And when you're creating innovative and really high quality products, it's even more difficult to find that. So it's not like there's 30 people in town that have $2 million laser jets that can cut your parts, so it's kind of holding on to like, okay, I hope they still stick with it, can provide us what we need.
Got it. You mentioned, like you said, not everybody has the materials you need to create the specific products or the specific pieces that go into each product. Mm-hmm. Could you give an example of like what goes into maybe choose a product and state like how you get each piece and then ultimately put it together? Does that make sense? Like you get multiple different, you get like screws, you get handles, you get this, that, all from different places. Is that correct? Yeah.
So like for the jack, for instance, we use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably like 6 different suppliers. Because I have one company cut the aluminum parts, one company molds the plastic parts. We get the hardware, then it's powder coated, and then the box that every box or every product gets its own custom box. So we pay for a die that costs a few $1,000s just to make the one box specifically for that product, as opposed to just getting something from, say, Uline.
Gotcha.
But what we usually do is once the design is completed, it's okay, sourcing those parts, and usually it's from people we're already working with. But yeah, I usually calculate, okay, what's the most expensive component that I need to purchase at whatever quantity to make this feasible, and then I base all the other parts off that. So okay, just say I buy 1,000 jacks to get the aluminum part for it to be, at the price point we need to sell it at. And I go, okay, well, how many? I'll buy 1,000 sets of the plastic components, and then okay, well, what's the best purchase for the hardware? And sometimes I'll buy 50,000 bolts because it's cheaper than buying just enough for the 1,000. So it's a lot of math and figuring out where I'm going to save the most money. And sometimes you can overshoot and buy more than you need, and that's absorbing your capital. But generally, the more you buy, the cheaper it's going to get. And so I usually piece it together like that, and it gets all shipped to us, and then we put it together. And that's where some challenges can come into play. If one person mismachines one thing, then we'll be able to tell if it doesn't fit. So everything has to be very precise fitment. So if one person drops the ball, then things don't come together as they should.
Got it. Yeah, a lot of moving pieces, quite a bit more than your typical what the customer knows, or thinks about when ordering. So that was cool to hear. I'd be curious to hear. I mean, you released 4 different products at 4 different business or at stages of your business. Most recently, the Atlas attachment. I'd be curious to hear how each of those releases compare. Like, was one quite a bit more popular than the other? Did one not do as well as you thought?
Yeah, so I think, the first release of our jack was probably the most exciting because it was uncharted territory, and we were just, honestly, it was a huge risk. And Sierra and I were, before we launched, we're like, this may be successful, it may not, we're on the fence there. But I think it was a lot harder in the beginning, but we didn't know any different. But it was a lot of it was the space. So we were like crawling all over boxes in our house, had tables set up in the house. So that was probably not as fun, as you could say, even though it was the infancy of our business. But I think the most successful was probably when we launched the 2.0, because that's right when COVID hit. And that's an interesting story because we actually were going to try a Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaign after discussing it with another company, because they said every time they launch a product, they do it that way. And that's their like business model. So I thought, oh, wow, like they've had success, so I'll give it a shot. So I built both campaigns, which you'd be surprised how much work goes into building a Kickstarter or Indiegogo pet campaign. And then the deeper I got into that, I realized, man, there's so many moving parts. There's, what if we sell 10,000 of these? Like, are we going to be able to support that? Because there's no like limit and cap. And, they take 5% off, the processing, then 5% off that. So it's now our margins are thinner. So it got to a point of where I feel like we were relinquishing a little bit too much control, because I had to pass through Kickstarter and you didn't have much control with like shipping quotes, that we decided we're just like, let's just do what we did when we first started and just launch the 2.0 on our site. And we did really, really well because we were nervous because COVID, we didn't know if are people saving money or people going to be out of equipment, because that was before everything took off. So that was a risk there, but we launched and it blew up pretty quickly. That's where we really kind of took off. And I think most companies were the same spot.
Got it. Any of them surprise you with how little excitement they received?
Not really.
Not
honestly, really. And that's the honest truth is we try to hype a little bit, like, hey, this is what's coming out. But with the little we spend and the efforts we put into like marketing and all that stuff, with the response we get from all our stuff is really great, because I think it's because it's different, so it's everything we create is unique. And that usually draws more attention. Yeah.
So it's got to be tough to like, I know I'd be curious to hear, how long is the process typically from like V1 to product release, outside of that very first one you did? And then how hard is it to like keep your mouth shut before launching?
That's tough, because I'm really, when I get excited about a design, I just want to show everybody. And I've learned my lesson a little bit, because I've, leaked pictures here and there sometimes. And like, I've privately showed people that I trust, and that's fine. But sometimes, like, hey, check out, here's a little feature. And then, that gets shared. So I think I'm a little bit more careful now. But I have stuff over here, like that trap bar I made, that I would just love to show everybody. and I was about to do just a, hey, check out what I made. I'm not doing anything with it, but there's a possibility that a variation of this may come to the market. But that's probably the thing I'm most excited about that I haven't shared. And that's tough because there's a lot of work that went into that. And I'm staring at it right now. And it's like, I know everyone would think it's really cool. But yeah, I'm excited about the design process. And
yeah. So how long did it take for you to launch the Genesis Jack Pro? I'd be curious.
It's tough because if there were less limitations, like, so just say we had a ton of capital and all the suppliers we have can turn around time really, quickly, I think I could launch something very quickly. It's just typically I get to a point where we're like, okay, we're about to launch this, and then I'll contact the companies, and either like the cost of material will go up and that changes everything and pushes stuff back. I'm like, okay, well, how do I redesign this a little bit to make it a little bit more cost effective? Because material costs are high and our stuff's innovative, so it's going to be even higher. So our margins are most likely less than most other companies, just so we could get them to market. And so I think the challenge usually comes from the cost mostly. So if that wasn't a factor, I think I could bring stuff to market a lot sooner, or if we had assistance, like other resources or help. So it generally takes longer, not because I'm spending more time designing, but usually because of obstacles that come towards the end, where I'm like, oh, we're gonna have to wait a second, because I think we're gonna launch the Pro Jack a year beforehand, and then COVID hit, the cost of materials went up, and that's a higher priced item. So
got it. So not really a question you can answer. All right. I just have a few more questions, but I mean, earlier you kind of asked what I have here is like, where would you like Kleva to be in 5 years? And you mentioned kind of a different distributor so you can focus more on design, etc. I'd be curious to hear, like, are you able to share like what kind of designs you'd love to work on, or the amount of products you think would be feasible in 5 years, growing from 4 that you have today?
Honestly, if I didn't have to manage the business and do the assembly, and I could just focus on design, and that was the only thing I had to put my mind to, I think I could easily come out with one pretty killer product a month. Because when I sit down and design something, I'll pretty much hammer away at it until I come up with the first version, and then I send out the files to all my suppliers to make a prototype, and that's what usually slows things down, because hey, we're 2 weeks behind or whatever. And that's where I feel like I could benefit from having a small like manufacturing facility, which if I do the licensing, I still may do, so I can do more rapid prototyping. Because I create something, I'm excited, and then I have to wait 3 weeks to get the parts and then put it together, and then I have to like, okay, refresh my memory, where was I with this, and then continue to revise from there. But yeah, I have a lot of, I've almost stopped myself from trying to think of new ideas because I have so many that are unfinished that I don't want to have 50 unfinished products. I'd rather complete these, get that off the table, and be like, okay, new design and all that.
Yeah, probably a lesson you learn as you go. All right, and then the last thing I have here is just we saw you visited AbMat. Would love to hear if there's a future collaboration with them soon. And then also just like in general, we've had those roundtables, and it sounds like all of the, the small business made in USA inventors and creators are kind of on the same page as everything, or on just about everything, and kind of push each other, and you're able to kind of get ideas off of each other. I'd love to just hear, like, number one, any collaborations you're working on that you could share, or just like how is it working with other people within the space?
Well, yeah, they're the first people that were actually doing some sort of, well, I did a collaboration with Ghost a while back. We came up with a design for them of the Jack, but this is more so like a partnership, I guess you could say. We've been talking for maybe a year or two on and off, and we share the same idea and values and approach of what we're wanting to do. And I think they offer a lot of resources that we don't have and capabilities. And I think that I'm pretty excited, but we're collaborating on a product that is going to help. It's going to cater more to the people that are wanting our products, but essentially they're a little bit out of reach price point wise.
Oh, okay.
So we're looking to invest in doing something that's a little bit more feasible to scale, and it doesn't require as much assembly and all that stuff. So you might see another variation of something soon.
I'm trying to picture what you can do with that foam they have.
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Cool. I guess that's going to do it. Anything else you want to chat about?
No, just thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And I like what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's cool that you're bringing a lot of the faces of the businesses to the forefront so people can get to know them and get a better idea of who they are and what they stand for.
Cool. Well, thank you for taking the time. I know a lot of people would love to hear the story of Kleva, and I'll make sure to plug all your links. I think most people listening know where to find you. But yeah, I think that's going to do it.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it.
Thanks.